Welcome, everyone. I still see a few folks trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get started with some introductions. I'm going to give everyone a heads up that this will be a little bit interactive. I'm using a tool called Miro, which some of you may be familiar with, and you'll get a chance to explore it in a little bit as we test out some of the frameworks that I'll be sharing throughout this presentation. So don't worry, I'll get you all prepped and warmed up, and then we'll dive in and experiment with the tool if you haven't experimented with it, but more importantly with the frameworks, which I'm sure that you have maybe some exposure to, but maybe not in this particular way. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again. It's so nice to see all of you and see that our list is growing here with all of the participants. It's been a great 2 days. Home stretch of the last 90 minutes or 2 hours before the closing of All Things Open, and it's just been wonderful to see the diversity of the speakers. The keynotes have been absolutely incredible, and just the adaptation to this format virtually has been wonderful to see. So I hope all of you have been enjoying yourself. You're still here, you're still engaged, so that's a good sign for me for sure. So if you're joining this conversation, we're going to be talking about just the different ways that we could be identifying what the core problems are that we want to solve, what core needs are that we want to solve for, and how to really have an impact and continue to innovate through this open source community or through the variety of projects and problems that we address in our day-to-day. So to introduce myself a little bit more, my name is Haya López. I'm a director of product experience at Optum. I'm specifically on the Fusion Optum Accelerator team, which is an internal innovation and internal enterprise accelerator. The Fusion team serves the whole enterprise. We operate across Optum, United Health Group, and United Healthcare, so all within the healthcare space, which right now is filled with problems and needs and challenges to be addressed. And so hopefully you will embark on this journey with me today to start to carve out and break down some of those needs and identify solutions for them as we progress. And within my role, there's a lot of cross functionality. So before I progress, there's a lot of elements to what we do. We interact with technologists, business strategists. Within our team alone, we have people with product backgrounds, business backgrounds, user experience and design backgrounds. And so just within our team of 25 people, we have a mix and a diverse perspectives. And across the different projects that we interact with and that we serve across the enterprise, we also interact across the different disciplines. And within that, what I'm hoping to share with all of you are some of the ways that we create collaboration across those ideas, and not just in terms of, there have been a lot of great sessions today talking about how to collaborate across open source platforms, how to collaborate across just sharing of ideas. And so hopefully you'll weave all of those learnings, if you attended some of those sessions, into the conversation that we have here today. That's one component of it. And really the other component, which we'll be focusing on, are the essential frameworks that you can leverage regardless of what position you are in. And that both is in terms of what level you're at within an organization, within a startup or a larger corporation, as well as frameworks that you can leverage regardless of what position you're in and what discipline you're in. And so there's so much that we can look at in terms of how to identify the core needs of an individual or a population that we're serving. Personas probably come to mind for some folks if you've dabbled in that. And really it goes beyond that. It's much more far-reaching in the way that we can identify core needs, but also take that through to the end of that story of defining what the actual core problem we should be addressing, no matter how small or how big in magnitude. So the focus of our conversation today is threefold. We're looking at the intersection. Once you have a person that you've identified that you want to solve for, the persona, the population, the internal department that you're working within. We've done projects across issue management internally within the company of how claims get processed and what the phone call center triage process might be. So it could be as simple as or complex as that, or it could be as specific as a particular challenge you and your coworker are trying to address. So it could be as small as that, or it could be as big as a whole process that you're trying to address. So once you know who it is that you're solving for, that persona or that person or that population, we look at their core needs, and that's through leveraging Clayton Christensen's Jobs to Be Done framework. And the critical piece here is how we apply it within the context of our work that I think is very applicable across industries and across positions, as I said. We'll get into these in specifics in a moment. So once you've identified the persona's needs in the context of I hire you to, which is the framing that we'll use, we can begin to look at how to translate those learnings around the jobs to be done from our persona into the value stories that we want to begin to unwind and unravel. So and then this is addressing the persona or the population, I want some goal so that this reason. So an example here, as a patient, I need guidance and ease of communication with my care team so that I can effectively manage my ongoing health considerations. And so with both of those components, you can then start to unravel what the intersections of people, process, and technology, the capabilities that you want to use to begin to solve those needs. And you're getting very specific into what the core elements are that you want to address. And what I've found in the work that we do as we interact with folks at different stages of the development process, different stages of their strategy, alignment processes, they may have one component of this, but the really nuanced piece is how to combine these three to really illustrate a whole story, and not just to reuse the value story term or the user story term, but just to craft that story so that someone understands what the reason behind the capabilities that have been selected or the solutions that have been selected. And as part of that empathy building with the persona, as part of that evolving of who that person is and what their core why is, what their core job is that they need to be addressed and the reasons behind it, you strip out a lot of different assumptions that can be made around why this end solution or this component of the solution is essential or is the right solution. So I'm going to get into an example and then I'll pause for questions, and then we'll actually try and do this with the group that we have here, which I have complete and utter faith in all of you, given that your minds have been exercised for the last 2 days. So I built out an example persona for us, and I'll show you what the implementation of this framework looks like in the context of this persona, and then I'll introduce you to an entirely different person and we can test it out. So Maria here, she's recently retired. She's widowed. She has children and grandchildren, and she is her health conditions in this context is she has diabetes, recently diagnosed actually, depression, and some beginning indications of dementia. She's pretty active in her community. She loves dancing, fitness, and she really is self-taught in a lot of ways. She loves exploring new hobbies. And so her background is that her primary language is Spanish. She usually tries to text photos where she can to her care team, so her doctor and maybe the nurse that she's in contact with, because she's not really comfortable speaking in English to describe the medical issues specifically. It's hard for her to pronounce the medications she takes, and it's just, she speaks English, but not medical English necessarily, and not fluently. So these are some of the challenges that she's experiencing. Her goals are spending time with her family, managing her diet. Some of her worries are that losing the mental acuity, her memories, and really becoming a burden on her family. She really just wants to take ownership, and she believes that the tools that she could have access to, the technology she could have access to would really help her in that. And she sees the potential in them, but right now it's just not serving those needs for her. So taking the framework and the structure, and this is very simplified. When I normally do this work with my clients and the participants in my sessions, we spend several hours building and empathizing and diving into the research to really break down each of these components. But I did all that work for you, and so I'm going to show you the end output of what this looks like. So based on Maria's needs, we identified one core job to be done for her. She hires us to communicate with her. So I hire you to communicate with me and my loved ones in a way that is meaningful and helps us all understand. So given the prioritization of this, there's so many elements to this. There's a Spanish-speaking component to the communication. There's involving her loved ones as well. There's wanting to address meaning and help her understand, not just tell her what to do. So there's a lot of different layers to this one need. So in order to further define the need, that's where the value stories come in. It helps us expand and elaborate and add more detail. And it also allows us to begin to start thinking about what the solutions are that we want to use to address it, those capabilities, and also think about what are the components of measuring the success. So the persona's needs, the job to be done for her, helps us pave that way. So for the value stories, to help build on that, as a patient who speaks Spanish natively, so we're adding that level of detail. It's not just about Maria as this abstract person, but it's about as a patient who speaks Spanish natively. I want to have language options so that I can understand my health needs fully. Also, as a patient who lives by herself, I want to have someone to talk to so I don't feel lonely. And as a patient with multiple care providers, I need one place to message them so I can reduce the chance of missing something important. So in her case, she has a lot of different providers. She has a lot of different doctors that she's dealing with. So that's part of the element of complexity around the communication needs for her. And there's also this sort of subtle component in that second bullet around loneliness. So very simply, the capabilities or solutions that we start to build out, and remember, this is multifaceted, so that's very, very simplified, but this could be tools, the platforms, features, specific actions, any sort of component to the solution. It could be a variety of things. But in this case, let's say the capabilities or the solutions are a chatbot function, language options for her to select Spanish, and personalized communication preferences. She wants to check that box that she's texting primarily, because that gives her a little bit of time to figure out what she needs to say and how she wants to relay her question. So let me pause there because we're going to get into an example and actually have you dive into this. I'll pause for a second. Any questions, any thoughts that you want to jump in here before we dive into the activity? Pulling up the chat.
So feel free to put any questions you have in the Zoom chat window, the Zoom Q&A window, or you can raise your hand and we'll recognize you.
While you're thinking of those questions, if you do have them, I'm posting the link to this Miro that I'm sharing because we're going to dive into it together. But I'll give everyone another 30 seconds to think of a question if you have it and to get into that link. So the link should be in the chat. Oh, I sent it to just panelists. One moment. Thank you, Michael. All right. Wonderful. All right, so I see a couple folks diving in here, a few more. We'll give everyone another 20 seconds. I would love to know the show of hands if you have that ability. Have you, anyone who has not used Miro before? It'll just help me gauge how much detail to go into here. So ping me in the chat or raise your hand if you have not used Miro. All right, thanks, Jeffrey. Jayesh, perfect. Okay, good to know. First time users, not a problem. Well, then you're getting a double lesson today, how to leverage these frameworks and a really awesome collaborative virtual collaboration tool. All right, let's dive in. It looks like we have a handful of folks in here, so y'all are gonna help me out. So I'm gonna summon you to where I am so that everyone is looking at the same thing for the moment. So I'm going to introduce you to a new persona. So it's a little bit different person just to give us a more to experiment with here. This is
Sorry to
Annie.
interrupt you.
Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt you. If you're going to have an interactive activity through chat, people should make sure they send their messages to everyone.
Perfect. Yeah,
Make sure
that
you
would be
send
great.
to all. Make sure you send to all and not just to panelists.
Yes, that would be great. And we'll be adding components into the Miro directly as well. But either way, I'll keep an eye on the chat, and Michael, you'll help me out as well. All right, so Annie here is a single mom with depression. She sort of had the life plan put together, has two beautiful children, but things didn't quite work out with her husband. There was a lot of bumps in the road, and they weren't able to keep things moving forward. So she and he decided to get a divorce, and that's where things began to sort of unravel for her. She's not really sure exactly when the depression started, but feels that at a minimum, it's just totally out of her control. And at a maximum, she's just trying to keep it together, make sure she has ends meet, and really is eager to keep her kids happy and keep as much control over her depression as possible, which is very tricky as it sort of spiraled and escalated. So she's really hardworking. She's normally just very eager to stay healthy and to go on runs and play with her kids. She's very active in their lives, attending their recitals and their games. And so really her main sort of health concern here is her mental health and keeping things stable and making sure her kids are happy and stable. So if this is our persona, and this is sort of the high level of detail that we're working within, she's, director of marketing at a real estate company, nurturing mom. So now we're going to test out this jobs to be done and look at the progression between jobs to be done into the value stories. So pretty simple. If you haven't used this before, all you need to do is double click into the sticky note. So you'll see I am typing right here. I've laid out a bunch of sticky notes over here for you. So you just need to double click onto it. Over here, if you're still looking at my shared screen, over here, if you click on this tab, it'll give you the navigation cursor, but you can also click the arrow that will give you the opportunity to actually type into the sticky note. So that's the mechanical piece, and you can move around like this. I'm going to bring everyone to me one more time just so I make sure everyone is where they need to be. And if you need to move over to the left to where the persona is, you can sort of drag the cursor over to the left. So now I want you to think about Annie. What are her goals from personal, physical, emotional, or work related? So it's all through her perspective. So I, Annie, hire you to, and you is all of us. So all of our diverse skill sets of the folks in the room. If we had a 90-minute session here together, I would have everyone introduce themselves and get a sense of who's in the room. But just think through who you are and what you're able to offer someone like Annie. Don't think about solutions just yet, but think about, her personal, physical, emotional, and work-related needs. So an example that I have here, I hire you to help me without me needing to seek it out. She's overwhelmed. She has a lot on her plate with her kids, and she just needs the help when she needs it. Or I hire you to make my life easier, just simple, broad. So I'd love to have the couple of folks that are in here with me just dive right in, add in a couple sticky notes, and then we'll progress it just to keep the conversation moving. So I see a question here along top or side. I would just add it down here in these sticky notes that I've already built out. If you need more, feel free to add another one, another row if you need it. But great, y'all are as smart and savvy as I thought you would be. So you're diving in. I'll give you another 30 seconds to a minute to fill out some more of these. These are great. Be a workout buddy. Help me find new ways of dealing with my condition. Take my mind off what's already weighing me down. Help me when I'm feeling low. These are wonderful. Carpool, yes, just very practical. Awesome. So finish up your last sticky here and we'll keep it moving. These are awesome. So help my mental health without focusing on my mental health, make me feel good about myself, take care of my yard work. Some of these are very specific to the point, which is really good. And some of these are a little bit more broad-based. which is also really good. So normally what we'd do at this stage is we'd theme all of these into buckets just to get a better sense of not only quantity, so where the weight is heavier in one area versus another, which allows us to shape our focus. And then theming also just helps create a little bit of structure around the content, especially normally in these sessions, we have 20 or so people all adding content at the same time. And so we'll be able to get a better sense of the content that's there and give each section its time and its discussion point. So as you're finishing up your last sticky here, I'll move over to the value stories and then I'll show you how they connect. So what I'd love for you to do is we can choose one of these, and I'll say, let me take a peek here. I'll choose a couple that relate. So connect, focus, all right, so I'm going to take these handful, which all of these obviously overlap because we're talking about the same persona. So in a sense, they all relate because of that. But in an effort to continue to move us along, we would, normally theme, we would vote even, or just sort of have a decision maker in the room decide that this is the highest priority item. For now, I'm just sort of deciding that these are the 4 highest priority pieces, help me with my mental health without focusing on my mental health, help balance work and personal life, connect me with other individuals who have similar goals, and help me organize my life so I'm not as stressed on what I might have forgotten to do. So now we're going to think through what the value stories are against these jobs that Annie is hiring us to do. So we're looking at the user, which is Annie in this case, and the ultimate objective of her goal. So she wants to do something for the motivator, what motivates them, what drives them. So we're sort of stripping away assumptions here and really trying to concretely say what she needs and why, and their purpose or their core needs. So this is where the job to be done could come in as well. So take a stab at it. You might see here, so as a patient, I want to have access to my last visit detailed notes. So this is unrelated to Annie, but just sort of shows you the structure. As a patient, I want to have access to my last visit detailed notes so that I can review my care plan before my next appointment. So I'd love for you to just take a couple minutes here to dive in. I see there's something in the chat. Yes, dot voting is a feature of Miro. Minimal, simple. Yeah, we definitely use the dot voting. Sometimes we use the emojis on the sticky note itself. Definitely gets the job done. That's a great addition. Awesome. So would love to have you jump in here. And this is where you would weave in one of these 4. So choose one. You can choose a second one later, but really focus in on one and what the goal is that they're trying to identify and for what reason. So you're extrapolating, you're adding more levels of detail here. And I can show you, jump back to sort of the specific example of the progression. So we took, I hire you to communicate with me and my loved ones in a way that is meaningful and helps us understand. We took that core job to be done and we built out these 3 value stories against it. So remember how we defined communicate in a variety of ways, from the language component of Maria speaking Spanish, but also from a multiple care providers component because she has a lot of conditions. So how would that be similar or different here as we dive in? So the user, yeah, great question, Michael. So the user type here would just be Annie. So in our case, we only have one persona just for the sake of time. So our persona Annie, you can abstract it out to patients in general. So patients with depression, you can add a level of detail around Annie. So in a similar way to Maria, we said as a patient with a language barrier, I forget the exact phrasing, but as a patient who speaks Spanish natively, and then that was sort of the descriptor around the persona. So for Annie, it might be as a nurturing mom, I want help balancing work and personal life so that I can get to my therapy appointments, or so that I can prioritize running every day. And I would love feedback or input on it if user type is confusing, if there are other terms that would be more clear. Open to suggestions there. And if you're confused, I just say user great. Keep it simple. I like it. If you're confused or have any questions while folks are filling in, just let me know and I will answer them. So just to explain this a little bit more as folks are diving in here, the reason there's a progression from jobs to be done to value stories to capabilities, which is essentially the variety of solutions that we build out, is we're crafting this holistic view. And the way that we use this is if we're diving in with a particular project, no matter what stage it's at, but let's say they've defined their persona, they've defined the market that they're trying to serve, they have maybe an existing solution, but it's not where it needs to be from a technology and development perspective. So they're looking to evolve it and upgrade it. And so if that's the case, then we don't want to necessarily just throw out solutions and create updates that may not necessarily solve whatever the challenges are that Annie or Maria are experiencing. We might instead want to shape this holistic story of who that market is, what their current challenges are with the tool or with their healthcare needs in this case, within the industry that we're operating in, and then be able to shape that all in one single page. So that example that I showed earlier on, that one single page, so someone can view that and better understand, okay, this is why I'm creating a chatbot. It's not just so that it's an easily accessible thing. The chatbot is so that our patient can talk to their 10 providers that they have because of all of their chronic conditions. And so I've chosen these 4 jobs to be done. In theory, it would be 1, but we would build out all 4 separately. We could even have them, listed out in their own columns, and then build out underneath them would be another way to organize it. These don't relate. Yeah, so exactly. So Michael pointed out, so this is great. This is why we test it out and actually experiment with the framework to better understand how it's used and how it's leveraged. There isn't necessarily a wrong way to approach any of this. All of these details are important and helpful, assuming obviously that we're all familiar with Annie as a persona. We've read through the user research. We understand what the current state is for her, which we're acting under that assumption here today. But then we build out, from there what each of these jobs to be done components are, what the value stories from there are, and then ultimately what solutions and capabilities we want to drive towards. Great. Awesome. So this is great content. I'm going to continue along to show you where we end up here, now that folks are a little bit more on the same page of how this all progresses. And the last piece here in the process, as I zoom in here, it sort of ends the section of y'all's interactive component, although I'll wrap up in a second here, and then we can dive into this tool as much or as little as everyone wants to in the last 10 minutes or so here. So once you have all the jobs to be done, once you have all the user stories or value stories, and value stories are a little bit different in this context. They're structured similarly, but it helps build out this sort of holistic story that we're building out. And in this context, the whole view, that one slide that I showed earlier with each of the 3 components, allows us to shape a better picture of what measurement we want to have, what opportunities we have to identify key performance indicators to really shape up, how these solutions are matching up to what the needs are. So we're not just making assumptions and building things and then seeing if they are successful or not. So in this context, in this last step here, as we're running through with a group of people, maybe it's all your specific team, or maybe you're bringing in diverse sets of expertise into the conversation. Whatever the case may be, is you want some level of prioritization. So you want to reflect on the core needs, the value stories, as well as the capabilities that you've identified. So assume that we went through that. And you want to map out where they fall within a 2x2 would be one way to prioritize it. There's so many different ways. This is just one way that we're sharing here. And even within a 2x2 prioritization matrix, you might even decide that the 2x2 components are different. So what we have here is high impact and low impact. High impact being to the persona, so to Annie specifically, what would benefit her the most, and by identifying what her core needs are and the value story that she has shaping her whole picture of who she is and her needs, we're able to determine a little bit better what is highest impact versus lowest impact. Is it the hiring a personal chef to help her with her cooking needs? It might be. That might be her, one of, if we removed that because she absolutely hates shopping, then her mental health and well-being will increase. So that's just with additional research. High effort versus low effort. This is in terms of resources. You can think about it in terms of time, number of people, the financial impact. You could also switch these up. So it could be, instead of low effort, high effort, it could be value to the business. So if you're trying to figure out which areas align best to what your company does, what your team excels at, you could sort of do an assessment based on that first, as well as tracking against the impact to the persona. It really depends on what stage you're at and what you're trying to quantify. And this is just one way to break it down. And as you can see within this structure, we have a couple of buckets that allow you to identify which are the quick wins. So things that you are low effort but high impact that you can just crank out to create a better experience for Annie. And then the big bets, the areas that will have the potentially a high risk associated to them, but because of the research that you've done and the discussions that you've had, the high effort and high impact really indicate that this is going to be worth the investment. And then there's, sort of the other fill-ins potentially, or, backlog that maybe should just get trashed because they're low impact and high effort, but maybe some of those we wheedle out some ones that would be beneficial and could be a better fill-in later on or to add additional features. So with that, I'm happy to jump around. I think we have about 5 minutes left here. This is my contact email. If you have specific questions, you've tested out the framework and you're lost, or you've tested out the framework and you've improved upon it, would love to hear from all of you on what that looks like for each of you, and share learnings across the board, because that would be really wonderful to see how you've experimented with it. I imagine it won't be in the context of healthcare, although hopefully these examples, these real life examples, were able to get you a better idea of how this all flows together. So with that.
Yes, I am sorry to interrupt. We do have about 5 minutes left in the session, as you know. So feel free to use that time to entertain questions or for any other discussion or comments you might have.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. Also the Q&A, but feel free to just jump in. I'll zoom out to this whole. Awesome. Love it when folks make Miro their own. There's so many tools like this, and there's a free version of this for you to play around with as well. Tons of functionality, wireframing, whole slew of things. Any questions from folks? Thoughts, comments? Have you used jobs to be done before? Have you used value stories or prioritization in this way, personas in this way?
We do have a question from Michael, so let me give him talking permission, and this question can be asked. And Michael is muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
This is great to be unmuted. I've been typing all day. Yeah, personas a lot. I've just recently heard about jobs to be done, so that's interesting. Thanks for reintroducing it to me. And
Absolutely.
I've been using Miro a lot, so it's good to see some old tools with some new tools, because I kind of knew the personas, so it's neat to see how you're playing with that with Miro.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting to play around with these frameworks in combination with one another, because it often gleans either a different story or a new insight, or at a minimum would just reinforces what we already know, which is helpful as well.